or looking to build new strength for the 21st century. Thanks for joining me today. The internet's been a little fluky. Normally we do this Tuesday conversation with Adam Young and we kind of interview one another and swap stories, and that makes it wonderful. But the internet has been screwy this afternoon, so it could not sustain a Zoom call, going live, OBS all together. So you just have me today for the next 20 minutes or so. We're going to try and keep it pared down to just 20 minutes because I want to talk about something that I think is really important and really unique. And I think a lot of us are beginning to feel it, but here's a way to think about it a little bit more, codify it a little bit more, and maybe share it a little bit more. And that's how win win attitudes and win win moves are stronger. They're not soft. Win win is not a soft way to go. It is new strength. And it is way better than continuing in the old win lose hierarchical man box BS game, right? So, again, win win, it's not passive, it's not soft, it's bold, and it's powerful. So, like I said, win lose, right? This system that is kind of set up. It's hard to talk about this as without saying that somebody set up a system. And I don't think anybody consciously set up a system. It's that means that we're always competing against one another. That means that we're always stuck stepping on one another's fingers and always sliding back and never really succeeding. I don't think the powers that be created this. I think this is just how it's evolved, and maybe it evolved out of ecological and environmental competition, but it's no longer necessary. It turns out that that's really not how humans succeed. We succeed best when we're supporting one another and looking for win-win solutions, because the win-lose paradigm, the idea that in order for me to win, somebody else has to be lower, that there's a zero-sum game, there's not enough pie for everybody, for anybody to win, somebody's got to lose, that keeps us scrabbling all the time, and it's exhausting, right? Um, and it's so some people seem to thrive in that environment. Like Adam and I were just talking on the phone about how in the business world that he existed in years and years ago, the sales world, he said everybody talked like there was camaraderie. Everybody slapped high fives when somebody made a sale and all that stuff. But underneath, there was always this pressure that if you weren't winning all the time, you were losing, and you were going to lose your sales territory. You were going to lose your perks. You were going to lose your commissions. So that's exhausting. It means we're always competing. It means that we're never feeling safe and comfortable. My story, I was in a very small work unit for a while where and we were doing something that should have been totally oovy groovy and wonderful. We were leading outdoor trips for folks in recovery. There were only 3 or 4 of us on the team at any one time. We were all very simpatico, had very similar experiences. But for a variety of very strange reasons, we were always competing with one another and always on eggshells around one another. There was never really shared leadership. There was never really a sense that my teammate's success was my success. I was always resentful when there was more attention being paid to one of my co-workers, my co-leaders. There were all these different ways that we kind of cut one another down or interrupted one another or argued with one another, and it was just exhausting. And it meant that the participants weren't getting the best version of us. They weren't getting the best leaders. It meant we weren't necessarily always keeping things 100% safe, 100% wonderful. So I've experienced living in the work world of that win-lose situation for sure. So it holds back business, absolutely. Simon Sinek does a great presentation around all the different brain chemicals that show up in the work world, right? There's cortisol and adrenaline, and that's what's always on board when we're in those win-lose situations. And cortisol and adrenaline are not sustainable. They actually shorten our lives, and they make us tense and make us miss things and cause us to make mistakes. We don't need adrenaline in the modern day world. For the most part, we're not lifting cars off of babies very often. We are not attempting to outrun pumas with any kind of regularity. Adrenaline and cortisol are just not useful for the most part. And what's really useful in the work world that he talks about is oxytocin, the bonding chemical, and dopamine, the reward chemical, and those are missing in that win-lose scenario. Only the winners get the dopamine, leaving everybody else just sucking on cortisol and trying to keep up with by drinking more coffee. And it also, the win-lose paradigm also really curtails relationships. The Gottman Institute studied for 40 years, I think 4 decades, looked at marriages, and the one thing that they could find that predicted the early demise of a relationship, the early demise of a marriage, was disdain or contempt. If disdain or contempt were present in a relationship early on, that relationship tended not to last longer than 4 years. Any kind of attempt to build and hold on to superiority or one-upmanship, or again this win-lose, is what makes relationships not sustainable, because you can't build oxytocin, you can't build that bonding chemical when you're on eggshells, when you're on cortisol, when you're wondering whether somebody's going to throw you underneath the bus at the next dinner party or in front of the kids or whatever. So the alternative, this win-win attitude, creating a win-win, always looking for win-wins, is what's going to make business relationships and personal relationships more powerful, more sustainable, more long-lasting. And it does take a little work, because we've been taught that if somebody's winning, it must mean somebody else is losing. Is that me? Am I the one losing? We're taught that if we're always supporting somebody else, lifting them up, we're the patsy, we're the weak one, we're the sucker. And I think we have to change. I know that we have to change our thinking around that. So it takes an active process. It's not weak, it is bold, and it is strong to be actively always looking to support win-wins, to create them, and to reward them. So it's not about compromising, right? This is not a win-win situation, a win-win paradigm. It's not about, well, I'll compromise a little bit and you compromise a little bit, and we'll just kind of bring the overall level of play down a little bit. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about giving up. I'm not talking about just giving all of one's power and success over to somebody else. I'm not talking about being codependent. I'm talking about creating an environment where everybody is lifted up, because we're always creating, looking for, and rewarding win-win situations. So one way to go about doing this is to change one's attitude in 3 different ways. And we're just going to end with this. One new way to think about how to be in relationship with other people is to keep telling yourself that somebody else's win, somebody else's success is actually beautiful. And the story that I can tell about this is when I used to play ultimate frisbee, just pickup games, nothing really serious. And something that I learned to do in that environment was to celebrate and give high fives to a teammate from another team who just scored a goal, or who just caught a beautiful pass, or who just intercepted the frisbee. Like, awesome job. That was a beautiful play. Like, sports are really, athletic accomplishments are beautiful. I'm not a huge sports guy, but I love seeing the human body do remarkable things. So that came actually relatively easy for me to give a high five to somebody who just, stepped out from behind me and caught that pass from his teammate and scored a goal. Like, you know what? I got to give it to you. That was beautiful. So noticing when other people are succeeding or other people are winning, and just going ahead and labeling that beautiful and desirable. That is a valuable thing that just happened, whether it's in your workplace, in your relationship, your kid, whatever it is. That was awesome. That was beautiful. Thank you for that. That was gorgeous. And then the next shift is to start seeing other people's success, other people's winning as a shared win. So it's extending the bubble of what me is to include the we. And that can be relatively easy to do in a relationship, but obviously not everybody can do that. Those people who find themselves expressing disdain or contempt in their relationships have not successfully wrapped their arms around the we of the relationship. So, and I struggled with this. I think I talked about it in the last podcast we produced, but I think I cut it out, not intentionally. I wasn't trying to cover my tracks, but I got fired from my job almost a year ago now, and at that same time, the responsibility that Kelly, my partner, was having in her work was increasing, and the level of her output, the wonderful stuff that she was creating in that job, the quality of it was going up, the capacity was going up. And I noticed in myself some jealousy. I noticed that I didn't like it that I had gone from being the primary breadwinner and the primary producer of beautiful, new, fantastic things. Now that was Kelly. Now Kelly was making more money, and now she was producing more beauty and moving the needle in ways that I wasn't able to for the last few months. And it took a conscious effort of me to go, you know what? Her success is our success. Her success is good for the community. Her success is good for her workplace. It's ours. And I just, thinking about wrapping my arm around that and changing what was a win lose because of me. I was the one who was making up that I was losing. Nobody was telling me that I was losing. But by making sure that I was wrapping my arms around that success and celebrating her for it and telling her that I saw her and saw her success and saw the beauty that she was creating, that changed it from a that's happening over there to that's happening here. This is a win-win. This is good for everyone. And then the last part is more about being a leader and being in the work world, which is to always be creating goals that are win-win goals. So as a supervisor, if you're in a supervisor situation, or even if you're not, can you create goals that involve collaboration? Can we create measures that actually say we're gonna measure our success by how well we worked together? At Boys to Men, we used to say, okay, we're about to do something really challenging, really hard, and one of the measures of success is, do we still like one another at the end of this? If we still like one another at the end of this, then it'll still be a success. And obviously, the kids had to be safe and all that, but actually setting measures for how we're going to succeed together. Did everybody learn through this process? Is the whole work team gaining knowledge and expertise? If not, then there's something wrong there. It's not working right. It's not a win-win. So one of the new people who I've just met kind of intellectually is this guy, Leandro Herrera, Spaniard, who says that the number one goal of the leader is to lose control. That's a crazy idea, right? It's just so bold that the number one task of a leader is to lose control. And I think I have just enough experience with that kind of uber collaborative relationship and uber supportive leadership relationship that I can kind of get what he's talking about. And I did get to experience that in the last year, 18 months that I was working at Boys to Men. I was the executive director and I was in charge of everything, supposedly. And I started having such strong folks on my team who had such good experience and who felt so safe that they were beginning to do things. They were beginning to organize trainings. They were beginning to create systems that I wouldn't have done it that way. I would not have trained mentors in this particular way. I would not have set up a system in that for tracking growth in mentorship in that way. Just completely out of the blue. I wouldn't have done it that way. But that didn't matter. And what mattered is that was a great way to do it. And you know what? Like, I was just like, you guys try it. That's not how I would do it, but you guys try it. And so long as it's working for everybody, that's great. So that was a way that I was able to lose control of the situation and kind of gain from it. Like, I got to stand back and be like, wow, that's beautiful. Wow, that works. And that was much more sustaining for me. I didn't feel cortisol. I didn't feel adrenaline. I didn't feel anxiety. I I felt oxytocin. I felt bonding with those guys who were working so hard and being so creative because they were creating something new and beautiful, and that triggers oxytocin and dopamine for me absolutely. So find ways to actively, powerfully create win-win situations in your romantic relationships, in your parenting relationships, in your work relationships. We can do this together. It's about changing the attitude, looking for the beauty, looking to share it, and creating concrete goals around win-win. Tell me what you think about this. Love to hear your comments. Let me know about ways that you've either not been able to pull off a win-win or still struggling with that win-lose situation, or tell us about how you've created win-win situations. And I'm especially interested for folks in parenting relationships. What are some ways to create win-wins with your kids? I'm really curious about that. Thank you so much for listening and watching this live video, and we will see you next Tuesday on the Redefining Strength channel here. Thank you, brothers. Bye bye.